Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason, speaking to you here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. And this 5-minute review, I'm doing another book review of a book that I checked out at the library. As you know, I like to do a lot of autobiographies and so forth. This one is one on Eddie Guerrero. He wrote this one, Cheating Death, Stealing Life, the Eddie Guerrero story. Yeah, great wrestler. As you know, I'm a big wrestling fan. I've talked about it on the channel a fair amount of times and plan on doing more. But anyways, yeah, definitely when I saw this, I wanted to check it out. Eddie Guerrero, one of my favorite wrestlers growing up. Watched him first with WCW when he was more of cruiserweight. He was actually going after the cruiserweight and won the cruiserweight title quite a bit. Went up against so many great wrestlers. They had so many great cruiserweights at the time. And I remember his transition to WWE, and then they gave him a push to the mid card where he was a multiple like Intercontinental and a US or European champion. And so he's winning a lot of those belts, and the whole Latino Heat thing really took off. And yeah, I always enjoyed him. He was just a phenomenal wrestler. Obviously, he had the ability to, do top rope jumps and stuff like that, which I always enjoy, those cruiserweight type wrestlers. But he was really strong, actually pretty jacked for a cruiserweight, and he could perform other moves anyways. And he just one of those guys that can have a good match with anybody. Anyways, so yeah, I always liked him. Yeah, really cool book. I didn't know he wrote this, so I checked this out, and I realized, oh, it's an autobiography, because this was written like around 2004. And sad news is he would die 2005, I believe, just like a year after this book came out. Evidently, he would unfortunately die of like I think it was like a heart attack or something like that in a hotel room while he was, on the road to wrestle and all that. And he goes into a lot of, his life, and it's a very interesting life, especially considering that he came from a very famous wrestling family, the Guerreros. His dad, Gory Guerrero, was actually really famous in Mexico and even in the U.S. He back in the 50s, he would wrestle the big names. Anyways, we don't know him as much because that was way before WWE and wrestling became a big thing on TV and that whole explosion. So, but at the time, he was really a big deal. And even Eddie's older brothers, Hector, I know he talks about, and Chavo, were huge wrestlers in their own right and were very popular Mexican wrestlers. So it's funny that he's really like Eddie Guerrero to me is like the most famous out of the family, yet he actually comes from a line of very famous wrestlers. So it's one of those cases where he grew up in the business. He had no other choice, it seemed like, but to be, I mean, he did, but even as a kid, all he wanted to do was wrestle. All he wanted to do was be a professional wrestler because his dad was, his brothers were. It's all he ever thought about. So it was like pretty inevitable that he would become a professional. And he talks about his, definitely had some hard times, really had to learn the ropes, working in different cities, especially working in Mexico, working in El Paso, Texas, he was big in. And so he went and wrestled in the smaller, things for a long time, learning the business and having, the hard life that you have as a professional wrestler, all the traveling and living in your car and all that, not having any money. And then he finally got in with ECW. He went to New Japan, and that's when he really kind of started getting big. And it was really cool hearing his stories going to Japan. That's where he met like Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho, some people that he became long life friends with. And then got into ECW and WCW, and that's when I, really enjoyed those, because that's when I started watching him. And it's interesting hearing about his story. Like Chris Benoit was like his best friend. They were just real tight. And he also good friends with Dean Malenko and Rey Mysterio or something. And a lot of those guys were his close friends. And then he had a lot of trouble with WCW not really pushing him. And so he eventually went to WWE, and he, like I said, had more success there. He talks a lot about his problems with alcohol and drugs. He had a really bad alcohol addiction and drug addiction, ruined him and his family. He eventually got fired from WWE. He got in a big car wreck and almost died. He almost died like 3 times in this book. Talks about, man, it's crazy that he came back after all the stuff that happened. And he's very honest about how he kept going back and being addicted. He couldn't stop drinking, couldn't stop taking pills. His wife almost divorced him. He got fired from WWE eventually because of it. I mean, he went to jail. just really terrible. And it's really sad to see this, addiction of him, and just he couldn't get rid of it for a long time. And then it was incredible. It's a really good feel good story in that he got over the addiction, got back to WWE, and then eventually won the heavyweight championship, which was such a cool like underdog story. In fact, because you never thought a guy like this would get the heavyweight championship. He was never that kind of material, it seemed like. And I remember when he got it, I was so happy for him. Definitely deserved it. He's so good, and it's been good for such a long time. And so it kind of ends where he wins the championship, and he even loses it, but he's in a very good place. He got back with his wife. He's a family again, all this. And yeah, it's still sad because I know after he writes his book, he would unfortunately die unexpectedly. So it's interesting reading this, knowing that. It's kind of sad going, oh gosh, he had his life together, and then he unexpectedly passed away because of his hard living and all that. But still a really great read, very quick. I got through it pretty quickly, as you can tell. It's a little over 300 pages. But yeah, a lot of interesting stories, and you hear a lot of stories about other wrestlers, the ones he likes. He's very honest with the ones he likes and one he doesn't like. You get all the dirt on a lot of other wrestlers as you get in these kind of books. And also his faith in God. He really talks about his faith in God and Jesus Christ and how that helped him get out of addiction. So that was really cool to see that helped him as well. And yeah, so really great story. Somebody that, almost lost it all, but came back, and through his faith in God and help of family members was able to come back and be successful. And it's sad that it ends with like him and Chris Benoit, his best friend, how good Chris Benoit is. And it's like, man, luckily he like died before he ever got to see Chris Benoit, what happened to him and how he ended up murdering his family basically and killing himself and causing the greatest scandal in WWE history. That would have been hugely detriment to Eddie Guerrero, but he died before that ever happened. So it's very sad to see all that and go, oh gosh, reading this book, it's like you don't know what's going to happen in the future, Everything seems okay at the moment, but it won't be. But anyways, I've gone on over 5 minutes because there's just so much to talk about Eddie Guerrero in this book. Really great read if you're a WWE wrestling fan at all. Definitely check this book out. Very interesting learning about Eddie Guerrero.